Welcome to episode 2 of Knowledge is Power, and you join us at a very blustery Hallcroft Fisheries near Retford. It is freezing. I got a big flask with me today, I tell you that. Today we're going to be looking at commercial silverfish fishing. I've been coming to this venue since about October this year and really enjoyed it, fishing some silverfish open matches and a teams of 4 winter league. We've been asked a lot of questions on social media about this style of fishing, so today hopefully you can join me, get involved, and I'll be able to answer some of your questions and do a few demos for you. Better still, we'll be announcing the winner from the competition from the last episode, and if you stick about till the end, you've got the chance to win a pack of gear that I'm using to catch the commercial silvers here today. When it comes to feed amounts at the start of a session on commercials, I always like to think there's a lot of fish in front of you. On these commercials, it's not like a river or a canal where they might migrate out of it. A lot of commercials are full of silvers and there's normally a lot in front of you. So for me, feeding less bait, especially things like maggots, casters and particles, is very important. If you put a lot of particles in there, lots of casters, lots of maggots, it takes fish a long time to eat them and there's not as much competition, whereas if you can feed fewer, you get a lot of fish in your peg competing for less bait and you can catch them a lot more efficiently. So for me, I always err on a little bit more negative in the winter and spring when it comes to feeding at the start. For example, today's session is about 6-7 foot deep here, so I'm going to introduce my bait in some ground bait and lean. And I've mixed up 1 bag of ground bait and 1 bag of lean, so it's a 50-50 mix. And into that, all I've put is a small handful of leaned up joker and an even smaller handful of dead maggots and casters, and there's a few dead pinkies in there as well because they were in the freezer. But if you have a look at my mix, you can actually only see an odd particle in there. So the theory is, like I've explained, fish will come along and they'll have to work to find them particles, and if my hook bait sat on top, nicely presented, they're going to pick it up quicker and I'll catch fish quicker. Like I mentioned earlier, you often sit next to people in matches, and although you think you know what they're doing, there's certain things that you can do with bait that you can't see when you're sat on the next peg, and one of them, relating to ground bait, is how you introduce it into the swim. Now here at Hallcroft, the lakes have been here for nearly 30 years, the bottom is very, very soft and silty. So an effective way to introduce ground bait is to feed it loose in your pole pot, pretty much like you would when you're fishing for carp down the edge. But that doesn't mean that that's right on all different venues or even here all the time. So think about what you're trying to achieve and put your ground bait into your swim in a particular way to suit that. For example, if you didn't expect the fish to turn up till later on in a session, I might make it into a much harder ball so it breaks down slower. I mean, I can squeeze this mix I've done today, I can squeeze it really hard into a putty-like ball, and that'll take a long time to break down, so fish will have to work and stay about for a long time to get to the bait. If it was towing really bad, you simply couldn't put it in loose because the tow would push the bait away, but you wouldn't want to feed a rock hard ball that'd sink into the silt. So if it's towing, maybe just a ball lightly nipped like so. So that'll go to the bottom where I want it, but then break down. So I'll have the bait in an accurate place, but it'll be nicely broken down. On calmer days, or today it's pretty windy, but it's not actually towing, I've put my rig in and had a test, I can get away with feeding it loose. And by that, like I've explained, I simply cover my pole pot, fill it up, bit fuller than normal, and press it in so you've got a bit of a sand castle, and that'll come out and make a nice carpet effect on the bottom. It won't sink into the silt, it'll lie on top, and it's a deadly way of catching commercial silvers in the winter. So for today, I've explained what's in my mix, and I'm going to feed 3 300ml pots of bait on each of my lines. I've got a swim at 6 metres, a swim at 13 metres, and to kick off, a nice amount of bait, but not too much. 3 pots, sand castled in, like been on the beach when I were a kid. Look at that. 3 of them on each line. That's the start. booms. Looks like I have, doesn't it? Because I'm all curled up. Just done it. Another question. Come on in. Do you fish dead depth or hard on the bottom? Good question, and it's a difficult one to answer because every day is different, and even more complicated, every bit of a single day is different. So what I might do at the start of the session might be different an hour in, 2 hours in, 3 hours in. It changes all the time, but what I can tell you is some general rules. Firstly, I like to fish with as little a line on the bottom as I can get away with that'll give me a nice static presentation. So on a flat, calm day, I'll fish 1.5 inches of line on the bottom so that when a fish comes along, picks my bait up, it's not got to move far for me to see a bite, which in calm conditions is easy because your bait's nice and still, there's no wind or tow, your rig's straight, fish picks up your bait, you see a bite, you've got him. It sounds simple, normally is on calm days. It gets difficult, however, when you've got conditions like this, when it's windy, it's towing, your float's bobbing about. But again, work on the basis of the least line you can have on the bottom to hold that rig and bait static is perfect. So today, I've had a few little practices with my rig, and I can get away with about 4 to 5 inches on the bottom with my float moving about, holding back on my spray bar to hold that bait still. So when a skimmer or a bream picks up that bait, hopefully it'll move my bottom shot pretty quick and I'll see a bite. But the all important thing is that bait is still over your feed on the bottom. Some days, if it's blowing a gale, you might have to fish 6, even 8 inches on the bottom to achieve that sort of presentation. So the perfect answer to that question is have a look at conditions, try and keep your bait still over your feed and you won't go far wrong. Another question we've been asked is about float choice for commercial silvers, and it's pretty simple because like the rest of the approach, you've just got to think about what you're trying to achieve and base the float you're using on that. So today is a perfect example because we're fishing a long pole line on the bottom, trying to hold the bait still for big fish, and we're fishing a shorter line where we're going to loose feed some casters, fish a bit lighter with a strung out rig for a slow fall for smaller fish. So starting with a float for the long line, I want to hold that rig still, I want it nice and stable and static, so I've got quite a long float in profile with a wire stem for stability. Really important on days like today, it's windy, I need that float to be as stable as possible. The round body shape on the float helps me hold that still in any tow, so today it's towing to the right quite strong, so I can sit with it on my spray bar, hold that rig nice and still and have my hook bait on top of the feed static, which as we've already explained is vital. Final thing is a tip. A lot of people when they're fishing for silvers use really fine tips, and I'm not a massive fan of it because I ain't got good eyes. In fact, I've got contact lenses, so can't really be ginger and wear glasses, so they're in now. However, nice visible tip allows you to read bites, line bites, little dinks, and lets you know when fish are there, and when one picks your bait up properly, you'll see a proper bite. So for the long line, static presentation, wire stem for stability, round body so you can hold it static, and a nice visible long tip. For the short line, it's a little bit different because my rig is a little bit more strung out in the bottom half and I'm catching fish as that bait's falling in. So I've gone for a slim body profiled float. I've still got a wire stem for stability and a visible plastic tip, but the body profile's a lot slimmer, and what that allows me to do is fish through the water. That rig's settling a lot slower, and when I'm getting short, sharp bites on the drop from small fish, they feel a little bit less resistance thanks to the slim body profile, and when I strike, the float comes out of the water nice and cleanly. So I'm expecting a few more bites short of smaller fish, so I've gone for a slimmer pattern. We've talked about fishing with different amounts of line on the bottom, and of course you might want to change that during a session, as we've mentioned. So I always plumb up and get my float set at dead depth so that my bait is just touching the bottom. Plumb up, so just the bristles showing on the float, and then put a mark on your pole when your rig's hooked up that'll mark that exact depth. That way you've always got a reference, and if you fancy trying a little bit more on or a little bit off bottom, whatever you think might be good, you can do it, but you've always got a reference point to come back to. It's something I was taught as a kid from word go at pole fishing, and every single time I come fishing, I plumb up, mark the depth, and I've always got that reference. And also I think you're a little bit more encouraged to try a bit on bottom if you know you can quickly go back to your mark. So the pole lines have been fed, and I'm going to try something a little bit different today to start the session on. I want to have a little go with a waggler, just from a personal point of view. I've been fishing here. A lot of people start fishing on the feeder while the pole line settles, but I've got the feeling there's a lot of fish spread out in the middle of the lake. You catch a lot on a pole, but not a lot on a feeder. And I think the reason for that is you can fish a lot more delicate on a pole rig. You've got a light float, nice rig settling into the swim slowly. And I reckon if you can get that presentation out in the middle of the lake where the fish are to start with, you might nick a few. So I'm going to have a little go. It's a bit of a practice session today, which great thing to do when you do come pleasure fishing, or if you're lucky enough to get a chance to have a practice in the week before a big match, is to try things a little bit different. So this is what I'm going to do today. I'm going to start on a waggler, loose feed a few casters, nice and negative, because I've got the feeling water's clear. It's been freezing cold. That bit of commotion on the bank at the start of the matches pushes them fish out, and around 12 o'clock, 12:30, midday, they seem to come in and feed on the pole. But hopefully, by starting on this, I'll nick a few early. Well, that has certainly been interesting. Ooh, a lovely little start on the waggler, half a dozen skimmers at a time in the day when normally you're waiting for fish to turn up on your pole line. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we often start on a little ground bait feeder here and nick a couple of fish, but I've caught 6 on the waggler today in conditions that aren't very favourable for it. So I'm saying it's been worth doing, and it's something I'll definitely have in my armoury on future matches here. But got to the time in the day now, about an hour and a half after I fed my pole line, and I think there's going to be a few fish on it. I haven't seen any bubbles yet because it's windy, but let's give it a go and have a look. Well, not the easiest of days commercial silverfish fishing, but a very interesting one. First of all, that waggler was brilliant. A rock hard day, but we had a nice start with them half a dozen skimmers on it. The pole, however, a little bit more tricky, and I felt like because it has been so cold overnight, all the fish were huddled out in the deepest water in the middle of the lake, and it's took them a long while to come in. Now, something I've definitely learnt today is that dropping in on that pole swim and nicking an odd fish is great because you're getting an odd bite, but it's probably doing it more harm than good. It would definitely better today to wait until they've properly settled. So rather than nicking an odd fish that would probably spook the rest, I had to wait until there were quite a few fish gathered, confident and feeding for the very last hour to catch a run of them. And we've ended catching a dozen or so bigger skimmers on the pole, and it's been a really nice finish. So something that I've definitely learned, sometimes when they are settling in your peg, leave them, let them get confident, keep putting a little ball in there, get them so they're really munching on your bait, and smash them late on in a session. Picking out better fish when you are targeting commercial silvers is difficult because there's loads of them there, smashing your bait to pieces, and often you'll get a bite or chuck. But my number one tip for picking out an odd bigger one is definitely to fish on the back edge of your bait. Not necessarily past it, but just flicking your rig out past your pole to it so it settles on the back edge of your ground bait, the back edge of wherever your loose feeding casters, definitely picks out odd bonus fish and a better general stamp. 1 minute masterclass. Here we go. If I had to give you a 1 minute tip for catching commercial silvers, it's definitely to pay some attention to how you hook your actual hook bait. When you're catching a lot of fish, it's easy to get complacent and just whack a caster on, whack a maggot on, any old how. But fish in the winter have got clearer surroundings, they're looking at bait, and if yours is immaculately presented on your hook, you're going to get more bites and tempt them bigger, wary fish. If you're hooking a caster really lightly pierce it on. If you're hooking a maggot, be gentle not to burst it. The tiniest bit of skin so it's right on the edge of your hook and wriggling. And even more important, if you're using bloodworm, you don't want it to pop, you want it wriggling with attraction. Take care not to pop it, dead sharp hook, get it on there, you're gonna catch more fish. The moment you've all been waiting for, competition winner time, and I can announce that the winner of the first Knowledge is Power competition is, drum roll please, be quiet, Mr. Lewis Marshall from Sheffield. Come on down, sir, fellow Sheffielder. Everyone's going to think this is a fix, aren't they, because I'm from Sheffield, but it's actually not a fix. Lewis Marshall, don't know if I know who you are or not, but congratulations, you are the winner. And this leads us on to today's competition. As I mentioned this morning, we're giving away a pack of commercial silverfish gear, hooks, line, some of the brand new coming soon Guru floats, a little bit of an exclusive. We'll put a few of them in there for you. A bucket, a little bit of mainline bait, the mix that I've used today, and some extra stuff worth about £50. We're going to give that to the winner of the competition. All you've got to do to win this prize is subscribe to the Guru YouTube channel, like the video and comment with the words slimy skimmer, and you'll be in with a chance of winning like Lewis. Good luck.